Thank you guys so much for coming out. This is, again, like a crazy amount of people coming out to ISSessions. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your attention. And I'm really excited. We've got a loaded ISSessions today. Unfortunately, today, I will just preemptively state this. I do not have money to give away, but I really appreciate you guys coming out and being here. We have a lot of really good information, great presenters, a wonderful guest speaker that's here to share some invaluable knowledge to many of us who are in third year or who are in first year thinking about the future in cybersecurity or going to co-op. That being said, I'll pass this off to Jabril, who's going to get us started with the news.
All right, everybody, thanks for coming. My name is Jabril. I'm the event manager here at ISS. I'm going to get us started today with our news roundup. We have a lot of good articles and good stories to share today, so I'm going to be sharing the first one. I think personally I have the best story actually this week. So, all right, yeah. So we're going to do a news roundup. Adam's going to have an amazing middle segment about the $250 million Bitcoin scam. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to introduce our guest speaker who's going to give us an amazing presentation here today, and then we're going to wrap it up. So I'm going to be talking about real-world example of cybercrime that involves identity theft, fraud, and some shocking mistakes. So in January 2023, a hacker by the name of Free Radical hacked into Hawaii's death registration system. And you'd think that they use this access for something truly anonymous or complex. But no, Free Radical used the doctor's stolen credentials to fake the death of none other than himself. So Jesse Kiff, he used this doctor's stolen credentials to fake his death because and he used the cause of death as COVID-19. So his purpose was to avoid paying $116,000 in child support. But that's not all. After faking his own death, he went on a hacker forum to sell access to the death registration system, basically advertising the service like, oh, if you want to fake your death, you know where to come. Yeah, I got you. So essentially, he was advertising that if anyone wanted to fake their own death, they could come to him. He even posted the fake death certificate as proof of what he could do. So that's where things get interesting. He made a critical mistake. He left some personal information in the death certificate that he posted online, and he forgot to use a VPN while he was using this online forum. So he faked his own death from his house without masking his IP address. So this slip-up allowed Google's threat intelligence team at Mandiant to spot and post and realize that the hacker was actually the person supposedly deceased. So once the FBI was alerted, it didn't take them long to find him. They knocked on his door and they found him faking his own death. And that wasn't even his biggest crime. He's been involved in a laundry list of cyber crimes where he used, stolen credit cards that he found online to order DoorDash, get some chicken wings. And he applied for fake loans through stolen social security numbers. So when they asked him why he didn't use a VPN or when they were questioning him, he basically said that he got lazy and he just got too lazy to cover his tracks. So in the end, he was sentenced to 81 months in prison, and he confessed to over $80,000 in damages. But beyond the crime itself, this case shows human error, even for a skilled hacker like Kip, and it can lead to capture. It's a reminder that cybersecurity is more than just technical measures, and it's about vigilance, attention to detail, and healthy respect for the law. So thank you. That's my presentation.
All right. So the news article I'm going to be talking about is about the senator of Maryland, who was kind of tricked into going into a Zoom meeting with a hacker, or I guess some kind of threat group. And pretty much what happened was the threat group sent the senator of Maryland an email saying, oh, we're some representative from Ukraine, and we want to talk about some public relations and what's going on with the war. And we want to set up a Zoom call and just kind of discuss that. And it seemed legitimate. So the senators had that Zoom meeting set up. They went into the Zoom call, and it seemed like it was the representative from Ukraine, although it was a deep fake. So pretty much just a video of that, what seemed to be the Ukrainian minister talking to the senator of Maryland, and the so-called Ukrainian minister started asking some really politically charged questions, like, "Oh, if Russia were to send in missiles into Ukraine, how would the U.S. respond?" And the senator of Maryland was kind of giving his opinion and kind of releasing a lot of the political strategy he had. And they eventually found out, I guess, due to some kind of technical error, that it wasn't actually the minister of Ukraine, and immediately they ended the call and informed authorities. And yeah, so I guess it's just kind of a reminder to us to always be aware of who's talking to you, who's setting up Zoom calls. And even when you're in the Zoom call, that it might not be the actual person that you're thinking about. So yeah, just a reminder to stay vigilant.
Good evening to those in attendance, those tuning in on Discord and YouTube. My name is Abdi. I'm a third-year content dev on this amazing ISS roster. Today, I've actually got a pretty interesting story for you guys. As of June this year, security researchers have found a critical vulnerability in millions, yes, millions of Kia manufactured vehicles, putting their car security and sensitive client information at risk. The vulnerability in question affected Kia's backend API, which is responsible for having remote commands such as unlocking the vehicle, locking the vehicle, starting the engine, finding the location of the vehicle, many more. Hackers discovered that exploiting weaknesses in Kia's dealer portal, they could gain access tokens that would allow them to control the car with just the license plate. This put millions of cars at risk, and not just the cars. They were not only able to have all this control over the car, they were finding addresses of the respective car owners, names, email addresses, phone numbers, the list goes on. Once hackers had access to these access tokens, the impact and potential impact was very concerning. With just a license plate, you were not only able to start someone's car and steal it, you were also able to track them down and find where they were, which is crazy. Like, who wants to be tracked down? Like, it's not me. What made it worse is that the respective owners of these vehicles had no idea that their car had such a serious vulnerability attached to it. They didn't get any alerts and no notifications from Kia's mobile app, which goes to show how millions of cars could have been compromised along with their sensitive information. To put a number to this vulnerability, security researchers had reported that this vulnerability was only attached to cars that were built after 2013. So if we're counting from 2014 to 2024, which is 10 years, and also adding in the fact that Kia reports to annually manufacture around 2.5 million cars, that's about 25 million compromised vehicles just on the street. Thanks to the work of security researchers, they then reported this vulnerability to Kia, who then patched the vulnerability and made it secure as of August 2024. As many of us here aspire to be cybersecurity professionals, there are some key lessons to be learned from this incident, and I want to go over two of them. The first one being securing your backend API. You can do this with methods of strong authentication, which prevent unauthorized access. An example of that would be API keys, and also using logging and monitoring to detect unusual behavior on your API system. The more you log and monitor behavior on your API system, the easier it'll be to detect if something looks unusual or not. The second lesson I like to go over is understanding your system vulnerabilities. So pen testing continuously, assessing your system and identifying the vulnerabilities. Also regularly updating and patching the system if needed, and rapid incident response so that you can limit the scope of such a vulnerability if it were to damage your system. And the final one being identifying weak points, because as we all know, your system is only as strong as its weakest point. Thank you all for listening. That's all I have for you guys today.
Hello, everybody. Last time I presented, I didn't introduce myself, so I would just like to introduce myself. My name is John. I'm going to be fourth year in next term, so in between third and fourth year. I am the producer for ISSessions, but I do have a co-producer in the back. His name's Joel. He does help me out quite a tremendous amount, so that's very helpful. Definitely can give a round of applause to Joel for sure. So yeah, today we'll just be discussing some products about the Avanti breaches. Basically, they've had 3 breaches for vulnerabilities in the past 3 weeks. So 1 per week, which was pretty insane. I was actually going to do an Avanti one the last session, but I decided against it, and now it's even worse. So we can present it now. So if you're not familiar with Avanti, they basically provide IT solutions to like a wide range of companies and industries, which include like government, healthcare, finance, logistics, much more than that. But they do offer services like you can see there, their Avanti traffic manager, their endpoint manager, and something called Connect Secure, which is like a remote desktop application that they use. All of these have been actively exploited, confirmed by CISA and active researchers. We can definitely take a look into some of the vulnerabilities that we have here. The first one is from the virtual traffic manager. This one just bypasses authentication and creates rogue admin accounts. You know, nothing too crazy. But a patch for this one has actually been available since August 2024. This one is probably the least bad exploit. So the next one is actually something involving deserialization. So if you guys don't know what deserialization is, it's basically when you process when you convert data from a stored format back into an object that a program can read. So if that deserialization process happens on a server that's like unsecured, hackers can grab that data and modify files or create stuff on the server that they're not usually allowed to do. And in this case, it led to remote code execution on the server. So that was not ideal. And then finally, we do have something with their Connect Secure program. And that one actually is a SSRF forgery, which is a server-side request forgery. Many of you may not know, or some of you may not know what it is, so I can go into it just in brief detail, just so you guys understand. But basically, SSRF basically allows the attacker to trick the server into doing things that the server normally wouldn't be allowed to do. So you can access like restricted resources or maybe possibly sensitive information without even logging in, just being on the server. So yeah, basically to mitigate all these risks, just make sure you're actively looking for patches like all the time, every day, constantly making sure that the server, the applications that you use aren't, having vulnerabilities like this. But that's the end of my presentation. So,
all right, guys. I'll keep it nice and short. Don't go to the gas station anymore. That's my new story. Joking. So, on a serious note, this one actually was pretty interesting to me because it just adds another irrational fear to the list of irrational fears that I have, and that is just not going to the gas station anymore. So, there are, without going too technical, there are these gauges that basically monitor like fuel levels at the gas station, if they're too high, if they're too low, send out signals when they need to be refilled, but they can also expel fuel and they can also turn the system on to accept fuel. So as you can imagine, you probably don't want a vulnerability that allows you to do remote code execution that allows you then to empty the fuel at the respective gas stations. And they found that the 5 largest manufacturers of these gauges all had CVEs, which are just vulnerabilities that are found in systems, but these ones had some CV ratings that were 10, and I believe 10 is the highest. I could be wrong, but 10 I'm pretty sure is bad, and you don't want to do that. So very critical. Basically, every single one of these has this vulnerability. There's like 5 manufacturers. I don't know if I put the list here. I didn't, but I can send the list. The cool thing is you can't actually check, like, does SO use this gauge, right? They don't actually list any of that information. So best guess to which one you go to might be having its fuel drain. But apparently they're in the process of fixing this vulnerability, which is even more concerning because it should be fixed already. But I also didn't know that these gauges, many of them are remote controlled on the internet. So good thing that they have remote code execution vulnerability, that you can run OS commands on them, and they're connected to the internet. So very fun. Just be mindful when you guys are going to get gas. I did warn you ahead of time. Just, keep an eye out. If you hear some hissing or stuff, you might want to try a different gas station. So,
like more gas you normally do.
Exactly, right? So just keep an eye on that. But this is just a really good way of, addressing how critical our rules are in cybersecurity, because you know what? You might be thinking like, yeah, I'm gonna protect the world from, crazy cybersecurity attacks and stuff like that, but sometimes you can protect people right at home. So that's my news story, guys.
All right, thank you to all our presenters. That was amazing. I hope that you guys all enjoyed our news stories. So I'm going to be introducing Adam. Adam always does amazing little segments for us. So he's going to be talking about the $240 million Bitcoin scam. So really looking forward to it.
Hey everyone, my name is Adam. I'm a second year content dev. And today I'm going to be talking about the $240 million Bitcoin scam. So recently, two men, or a 20-year-old and a 21-year-old, just got caught and indicted for stealing about 4,000 Bitcoin. Now, if you don't follow, that's about $240 million to $250 million. So I wanted to just cover how they did it, the technicals behind it, and then also how they got caught. So this story kind of serves as a key reminder that, no matter how secure you think something is, no matter how secure you think your crypto wallet is, your password, your network security, whatever, all it takes is one little slip up and social engineering just bypasses all of it. So a bit of background before we get into the actual how it happened. There's three individuals involved in the entire scheme. Malone Lamb, who is 20 years old, and that's actually his mugshot right there. John Del Sereno, who is 21 years old, and then Veer Chatal, who is unknown, probably around the same age, but he's on the run. So Malone and John Del were the two people that were caught and indicted. And just again, a little bit more background about this company called Genesis. So they're a crypto lender that lent crypto. They went bankrupt in about earlier this year because they owed about $3 billion to their creditors. Yeah, so that's you'll see why that's important in just a second. So how it actually happened. Malone somehow got the list of all the creditors from Genesis. No one knows how. Could have been through public domain, bankruptcy files, insider, no idea. However, regardless, he got it. And then Veer Chatal, before that actually, they went and chose some criteria based off of those creditors on who to target. And obviously the person, or I just gave it away, but the entity that had the $240 million was targeted. And you think that it would be a party, a group, an entity, or an exchange or something, but it was just an individual person. So someone just had $250 million in Bitcoin just chilling on their laptop, which, anyways, so they chose this creditor, and Veer Chatal hacked into their personal accounts, all their Gmails, their iClouds, whatever they had on the cloud. And Malone scoured through that entire database, all the information they had, and they got personal information about him. So then, this is where the interesting part happens. John Del picked up the phone, called the creditor, and said, hey, we noticed some suspicious activity on your personal accounts. We may think that your accounts have been compromised, right? So just in case, I'd suggest you to change your passwords. We'll walk you through it. Creditor said, okay, yeah, no worries. I have a lot at stake here. So I'll just change my passwords. Everything went fine. Passwords were changed. John Del hung up the phone. About a couple hours later, John Del called back, not as Google support though, but as Gemini support, and said, hey, we noticed some suspicious activity on your account. Is everything okay? The guy said, yeah, I just got Google support helped me change my password just a couple hours ago. Is everything okay? John Del said, no, I think that was a scam. So, all your personal stuff and potentially your Gemini account, which is where the wallets were held and all of that, might be compromised. So this is urgent. So the guy said, oh crap, let's hurry this shit up. Anyways, so what happened was John Del instructed the guy, or the creditor, because we don't know who it is, to move the funds to another wallet off of the Gemini account. And he did, or they did. Afterwards, and this is where the blurb of what actually happened was. So after everything was okay, John Del said, okay, everything's good. However, in order for you to get your Gemini account back, we need you to prove that you own the wallet and that you own the Gemini account. Or sorry, I'm saying Gemini. It's Genesis. Anyways, you have to prove that you own the Genesis account. And this is where the blurb happens, because somehow they wound up getting AnyDesk on the creditor's computer. Don't know how, but for those who don't know, AnyDesk is just a screen sharing service you can download. And through that, they leaked the guy's seed phrase. So if you don't know what that is, a seed phrase is pretty much the most important part of your crypto wallet. If you have the seed phrase, you can access it anywhere, at any time. You can do anything with it, offline, online, doesn't matter. You have the seed phrase, that's your wallet. So that's why it was a little bit bad for the creditor. And you think now they have the $240 million, right? They took the seed phrase and then they transferred all it to their own wallet, or Malone's and John Dell's and Veer's wallet. And you'd think that it's hard to launder $240 million. Well, surprisingly, it isn't. They used 3 methods to kind of cover their tracks. One is they used VPNs. So in crypto, there's 2 types of wallets: cold wallets and then hot wallets. Cold wallets are just devices that you can buy where it's just an embedded system specifically meant for that wallet, for creating a wallet, for whatever. But then there's hot wallets, which through an exchange like Kraken or Coinbase or Crypto.com or Binance, they hold that wallet for you. So in order to access it, you need to access it through online, through the internet. And that's exactly what they did. They used hot wallets and they used VPNs to cover their tracks. And then they used this thing called pass-through wallets. So essentially, it's the process of creating a bigger web of transactions. If you have one wallet and it's full of $240 million, everyone's going to know where that money is. But if you have money going to one wallet and then money going to one wallet, and all those wallets are just creating a bigger web, it's harder to track where the final transactions go. And coupled with this, they used a thing called a peel chain technique. And a peel chain technique is essentially where every time you pass money through a wallet, you kind of scrape off a little bit and keep a little bit of money in that wallet. So for example, if I have 2 Bitcoin, I send it to one wallet, right? So I send 2 Bitcoin, and then I send 1.8 Bitcoin to another one. So now I have 0.2 Bitcoin in my original wallet. And then I send 1.6, then 1.8, or sorry, 1.4, then 1.2, and so on and so on. I'm scraping off 0.2 Bitcoin each time. And that's exactly what they did. And then eventually they used those scraped off, peeled amounts of Bitcoin to transfer them to regular currency, or kept it in Bitcoin, or they changed it to ETH or Monero. So you'd think that they go through this elaborate scheme of somehow scamming a creditor of $250 million and then also masking a quarter of a billion dollars again. So you'd think that they're kind of smart in not getting caught. So how did they get caught? Well, it only took about a day. And there's a couple things that were involved with it. So the first factor is the fact that they rented mansions in LA and Miami. That's not bad. Everyone does it, but it led to where they were. Then they went on shopping sprees. Jewelry, designer, cars, whatever. And that led to where the Bitcoin went. But the last 2 were a little bit questionable. So the third factor was the fact that they bought bottle service and signs at a club. It was about $100,000 for the night. And pretty much what they did is they bought the signs that clubs offer where you can write text on whatever you want. And the kid put his own name and flaunted it throughout the club. And then also, I don't have the pictures, but there was a lot of investigators were involved in this case, and he was mocking their names too. So he put their names and said, "Haha, like, I got away," and stuff like that. And so that's that. But the fourth factor was that he bought a lot of stuff for other people, mainly women. So now that doesn't ring any red flags at first, But the thing is these were influencers. So he bought, like, for example, you can see that picture of a pink lamb truck, and he still got rejected. And then there's other parts of it where he bought Birkin bags or other designer bags for other influencers, and then them naturally being, yo, some random guy named Malone bought me this bag, and they're all based in LA and Miami, and it was recent, so then the FBI would say, okay, maybe this guy's still here. So those were the main four, or the four factors. You think, okay, renting mansions, I can give you that, you can get away with it. Then you can go on shopping sprees, okay, that's not bad. The bottle service and the buying of presents is also not bad either. Questionable, but I can eventually get away with it. So what actually happened to led to their complete arrest? Well, they recorded the entire crime on Discord. And I'm just gonna say this, there's a bit of swearing, so I'm just gonna play. It's about a 15-second clip. It's a clip of them actually receiving the money live. All right, here's the clip. Surprisingly, there's something even worse than that. So they recorded the entire crime live, but remember how I mentioned how they were going through these pass-through wallets and they were going to different exchanges? They recorded that too, and in the process, they leaked their real names. So they're going through this entire thing. They leaked their real names. I don't know how the recording got out, but eventually it did, and it led to their arrest because they recorded the entire thing on Discord. So there's two key takeaways to take from this story. One is, again, as I mentioned, no matter how secure you think something is, again, your network security, crypto wallet, your seed phrases, your passwords, whatever the case might be, your laptops, your phones, all it takes is for you to just be a little bit stupid, a little bit naive, and maybe a little bit clueless, and social engineering just completely removes all of the security that you've worked so hard for. And the second thing is, if you're going to commit a crime, a felony of $250 million, probably best not to record it on Discord and not stay in the US where you can get indicted. It's probably better to just move to Switzerland or something and just call it a day because you're set for the rest of your life, right? So that's it. Thank you.
All right, guys. Adam, thank you so much. I absolutely love these middle segments. They're so fun. Guys, if you ever see Adam doing a middle segment again, now you know what to expect. You all got to witness it live. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. I'll put the code up on the screen for you guys to enter in your...
All right, everybody, I'm here to introduce Todd Brecher. He's going to do a presentation on the power of soft skills in cybersecurity. And I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Oh, hey. Hey, good. I'm gonna let my hair down, relax a little bit. We're among friends. Long day. So lots of familiar faces here today, some new ones as well, which is pretty exciting to see. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Todd Brecher. I'm a Seneca graduate. I graduated in 2022. Since then, I've been kind of in and around ISSessions as a speaker, friend of the community, helped to organize the CTF. My former employer, sponsored the event and was able to host everybody out at the Bay Adelaide Center. So it was fun stuff. I come from a technical background. My previous roles doing penetration testing, managing, call it cyber resilience engagements, certainly getting a technical degree. I was really interested in security for the hands-on keyboard type of work. But what I came to realize pretty quickly, as I started thinking not about the job that I was doing, but more about the career that I would have in this field, was that it wasn't really my technical skills that the people around me were seeing value in, right? And it's not to say that they're not valuable. It's to say that the really important people that I wanted to impress and the really important people that I was doing work for, what they came to me to do more of and what they asked more of me for actually ended up often being in the realm of my soft skills. And so, today I've got a little bit of a presentation. Some of you will have seen this before. I think this is a really important thing to think of it because, again, we're all going to have jobs in this field, but your career is not necessarily going to be defined only by what you learn in school or while you're doing your technical certifications. And so I think it's important to talk a little bit about the communication skills that are going to set you up to have a successful career in this field. I guess, today, this presentation, we're going to start just a brief introduction, just so you know a little bit about who I am, where I come from, why I'm here to tell you about this today. Beyond that, I think why it's important to focus on soft skills, and then a couple of sort of the really important ones that I think are worth spending a little bit of time on getting familiar with because they'll be useful for you no matter what your job title is. Let's dive right in. So right now, I currently work as a technical account manager at a company called Qualys. You guys ever heard of Qualys before? So we do a lot of things, call it multifaceted cloud security platform, historically known for vulnerability management. In honest truth, Qualys has been a cloud security company since like a long time now. They came after me not too long ago. I joined the team working in the post-sales team, where now my soft skills are more important than ever. I play a bit of an interesting kind of hybrid role, somewhere in between a consultant, a solution architect, an engineer, a support person, and a salesperson now, right? And historically, I came from consulting, where honestly, you do a lot of the same stuff, right? Working as a consultant, people come to you for your opinion on things. You need to be able to articulate yourself, hence the importance of the soft skills. If you have the biggest brain in the room, that kind of doesn't matter if you can't express yourself when you got to talk about, talk shop with your clients and the like. I guess kind of worth mentioning, my background, penetration testing. So that's kind of where I started. I was a co-op student originally with KPMG, moved on pretty quickly into a senior role, and then eventually became a manager in cyber defense there. One of my former employees is here, so that's kind of cool. Also started as a co-op student. We love students here. There's a big old sign. This is ask me about my keyboard. I mean, if anybody's interested, it's out here. I can tell you all about it. Just one of my kind of fun COVID hobbies, but I'm also a big coffee guy. Yeah, I like to be outside as well. Now, I didn't start in security. I don't know how many of you guys did start in security. I'm sure many of you also pivoted. In my case, I started in environmental and human health toxicology at the University of Guelph. So what I was doing originally was actually pesticide risk assessment communication and translation of scientific materials into education for farmers and, agricultural folks. It's quite a radical departure from what I'm doing now, in some ways. Maybe in terms of the field that I'm working in or sort of the language that I use, but in actuality, what I found was pretty quickly, once I had started to get into the security space, notably, I had dropped out of University of Guelph and taken a sales job working for a little company you guys might have heard of called ISSessions. Anybody heard of ISSessions? Yeah, a few people. They're a pretty cool company. You guys should look into them. They hire lots of co-op students. Great employer. I started there doing sales development. So I had no background in security when I started there. I was a business development rep. My job was basically to cold call, qualify, right? Understand who's who and what budget they have and whether they're interested in buying, are they working on security, that kind of thing. Instead of, just doing sales, what I found was I was really, really impressed by the very, very smart solutions engineers and the folks that were kind of mixing both the technical discipline with the sales skills and the communication skills to be able to close deals, architect these, grand solutions, and of course, then deliver. So I decided I was going to go back to school for it. All the while I was working at Best Buy, I was doing sales, retail stuff. Many people have had that kind of job. Funnily enough, I guess when I ended up getting into consulting, I realized that all of that stuff had kind of accumulated and turned me into a bit of a specialist. And that was part of why I was seen as so valuable, why I was able to build a very quick progression pathway inside of that first job. So, I mean, it begs the question, right? So what was the common thread in all of my background? Anybody have an idea here? Communication? Who said that? Well, you're a scammer. You've seen this before. So, but he's right. It was communication. And I think this is really important to talk about because it's not something that is talked about nearly as much as you think it would be for something so obvious. Okay. In every job that you've ever had and every job that you ever will have, chances are pretty good at some point you're going to need to communicate something to someone else, right? That's even happening now in school. If you guys have to write papers, that's communication before it is an essay, right? So here's kind of the central idea of my presentation. If there's one thing that I really want you guys to leave, to think about, and to kind of bake into the professionalism you're developing or into the plans that you have for your career pathway, it's to think about your soft skills. Because it's one thing to be the smartest person in the room. It is another thing entirely to be somebody of value, right? And if you can't express yourself, if you can't articulate your ideas, and if you can't drive value, especially in a deeply technical discipline, you're going to have problems, at least in the long term, if you want to kind of establish yourself more seriously and move beyond just being a doer. So, well, who do you really work for as a cyber person? Any ideas? Who inside of an organization are you reporting to? Speak up, guys. I'm friendly. I don't bite. C-suite, sure. Who else? Sure, clients, right? If you're a consultant or something, or if you're a vendor like me, right? I met with clients all the time. Who else? Yeah, like end users, customers, things like that. Yeah, totally. Oop. Your team, absolutely. Yeah, if you want to be a leader, you're going to have to communicate with your team, right? IT, right? You think about the really important people that you're going to be interacting with across a business. You know, what denotes importance? In most cases, it's that they're leading something, they're responsible for something or accountable for something, right? All these people, C-levels, VPs, your executive directors, your managers, your other leaders, right? How many of them are actually technical security professionals like you? More than zero, but not that many, right? In a lot of organizations, right? Obviously, within your security team, you're probably going to be working with other security practitioners, but who do you end up reporting up to? Who makes the decisions at these big public companies, right? Who makes the decisions, above your boss and above your boss's boss? You need to think about where those people are coming from. And I can tell you, based on my experience and, based on most of the publicly available information, you look at the who's who of major public companies, most of these people are not security people, even the ones who are accountable for making security decisions, right? So the answer, not many, being honest. So let's ask, right? Why are we going to focus in on security specifically? Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, look at my slides, because I had 2 days to prep for this. So don't mind me. But yeah, I mean, honestly, this first piece being that people often think that security professionals only deliver value through their technical skills, or that's the only pathway forward for you in a career. That's often not the case, right? Every organization needs doers, but for every doer, there's also a manager, somebody who's delegating that responsibility. And for every one of those managers, there's probably 3, 4, 5 other people above them that are responsible for a broader scope, right? You look at how businesses are structured, most of these people, they're not technical folks, and you're doing work for them that is beyond just the technical element, right? Say you need to prepare a report for your boss. Is that necessarily a cyber thing? Honestly, no. If you're building PowerPoints, is that making use of what you're learning in your Linux sysadmin class? But it is important. So it might be more valuable, right? Remember value, that's an important word. It's important to recognize what value you're providing sort of beyond just the skill set that you have. Because what you do for an organization is not necessarily going to be defined by your title or your degree or the grades you get in school or who you report to. In fact, the most valuable people are often people who are disruptive of that hierarchy, people who go above and beyond their own accountabilities, or people who are delivering value beyond what they're expected to do, right? So if you're looking to fast track yourself, you might want to be thinking about how can I deliver value, not necessarily how can I do what my boss told me to do next, right? Think about value. When you think about value, what does that mean to you guys? The word value. Any ideas?
Makes it different from others.
Sure. What else? True. Depends on the company. Some value that more than others, but it's all relative. What else? Yeah, absolutely. What else? Yeah, businesses are serving a purpose. So what helps them do that thing? Absolutely impact. What is the output, right? What actually happens if you do this thing or, if you're involved, for sure, right? These are all things that if you step back for a moment, none of them are concretely associated to your technical skill set, right? Some of them might be more close than others, but none of them are hard and fast going to require that you are proficient with a certain tool or, an operating system or something like that, right? So think about value and consider especially, what is commonly driving value inside your organizations. I'm going to tell you now, often it is being a good communicator. You guys all familiar with penetration testing? You ever heard that term before? Okay. Who knows what pen testing is? Somebody give me a definition here. Let's make sure everybody's on the same page. Jump in, speak up.
Cyber attack against the network, a web application, a system in order to assess the vulnerabilities that are present on that system and also exploit them to see the extent of which the damage would go and give a report to the client.
Ah, that's a pretty good definition. What else you got, Joel?
It's not just cyber attack, it's particularly an attack because of the physical presence of these attacks involved. Why simulate a web presence when you can walk right into the building and do it right beside the mainframe?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so there's all kinds of pen testing, right? You can do application pen testing, you can do web application pen test, you can do physical, you can do network infra, you can do AD, you can do, all kinds of different things, right? Absolutely. Yeah. That's like one of the things that I used to do a ton of. It's a lot of fun. You end up in all kinds of places you shouldn't be. Very important. Actually, I love that Bitcoin story because it definitely demonstrates that people are always softer than firewalls, right? So, keep that one too. Well, I mean, who wants to take a stab at this? There's no wrong answer here, but what do you think is actually more valuable? Is it the penetration testing itself? So, having a pen tester do the attacks, demonstrate the vulnerabilities, exploit the weaknesses, and show the impact? Or is it the report that characterizes and communicates what has actually happened? What do you think is more valuable? Joel, what do you say?
The report is anyone can simulate the cyber attack and whatever, but presenting it in a way that it makes sense to the people that have to fix the problems and spend the money on it. That's where the report comes in.
I like that answer. Anybody else?
Yeah, so I would also agree with Joe. It's important because penetration testing is kind of technical, but you have to report, as you mentioned, to the non-technical people that make those bigger decisions. So they need to understand what's going on.
Okay. Anybody disagree? You're welcome to disagree. There's no correct answer. I'm just curious to hear. What do you guys got to say? Yeah, jump in.
I disagree because I feel like to generate the report, you actually have to do penetration testing and to have somebody who has the technical skills to be honest.
The prerequisite angle. Okay.
They might either disagree with the report or either just not follow it. They could be like, we know better, we need the pen test. So I would say maybe the pen test itself is.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, those are compelling, things to consider, right? I don't think that there's any real correct answer. This is a bit of a nasty trick question, to be honest. But I will say, again, let's go back to that idea of value. So what in penetration testing delivers value to the end user or the end client? The results. right? It's not that the testing itself is not valuable. It certainly is. But does the client watch you over your shoulder while you're hacking away at the mainframe and like actually visually see you delivering impact? Oftentimes the answer is no. And they might be able to pull up logs, or they might be looking at, screenshots. You might be talking to them on a call and screen sharing or whatever. Sure, that's cool. But again, at the end of the day, what are those people going to do with your pen testing results? They're going to request a report. They're going to take the report, and then they're going to send it onward and upward to the powers that be. They're going to say, hey, we got a bunch of problems. Our testers identified, and you guys got to fix it. And it's going to go out the door. And then what? Other people need to use the report, not the testing itself. So it's not to say that there's this massive discrepancy in value between the testing or the reporting, but where will you perceive value? Where is the business going to actually take your technical skills and the technical assessment that has been done and find value in it? It is always delivered through the report, right? So let's talk about, I guess, a couple of skills that stand out for being able to deliver value, shall we say. So the first one I think is a really important one. Understand your audience, okay? The second one, using plain language. The third, being precise and concise with your language. And the fourth, being aware of your nonverbals, okay? I'm not doing a great job of that because I haven't seen these slides in like 9 months. Don't mind me. Understanding your audience. You guys ever done any public speaking classes? Anybody ever told you that you need to know who you're talking to, right? If you want to communicate in this field and you want to be really effective at getting your point across, you really have to be able to kind of read the room and understand, who am I talking to right now? How are they going to respond to this form of communication that I have, right? What language do I need to use based on who I'm talking to get my point across is a really important thing you got to consider. So we're talking about understanding your audience. A couple of questions you can ask and answer for yourself to make your life a little bit easier. The first one, who am I speaking to? So who is this persona? Is this an executive? Is this a technical practitioner? Is this a co-op student? Is this another student? Is this a colleague? Is this a superior? So what is the persona of this person and how do they relate to you? Because that should color a lot of things, right? What diction do you use? What cadence do you speak with? What kind of technical terminology are you able to get away with? Are you speaking more formally or are you speaking more plainly? Who is this person, right?
What kind of content you're talking about?
Absolutely, right? How are you going to communicate with this person, right? What medium should I use? Do I need to use analogy? Do I need to use visuals? Do I need to use text? Do I need to use something based on what kind of communication this is? This is something super formal, and you're sending some kind of communication upwards to people 3-4 levels above you or whatever, and you need it to be like a short summary kind of email. You've got your boss CC'd and that kind of thing. You need to consider, who am I really talking to? What language do I use? You're going to speak very differently to your manager than you are to, as a C-level at your company or whatever, right? So what media is going to get my point across best? Does it need to be a formal written report? Can it be a quick email? Should I call them on the phone? So how are you going to communicate? What is the context? Context is, it's king. The most important thing. Have you given them all the information that they need to be able to participate in a conversation with you, right? What's a conversation? Any ideas? Yeah. Ah, yes. What are you doing in a conversation? You are communicating. When you're communicating, you are doing exactly that. You're sharing information. So think about this, right? What is the context? Do they have everything they need to participate in a conversation to both receive my communication and to return or participate in exchange? What is my core message? Let me remember what my core message is. I've already said it a million times, right? If somebody doesn't say it, I failed. Pardon? Communication is key, right? The reason that I think this is such an important question, and this is gonna, it seems like everything I'm telling you right now is probably super obvious, right? You guys are like, oh, duh. Look, the reason that I'm here talking about it is because this isn't said often enough. What is my core message? That's like if I had 2 minutes with you in an elevator and I was going to try and get some point across, and it was the most important thing that I had to share with you on that day, what is it that I want you leaving that elevator with, where somebody could ask you later that day and say, hey, I heard you spoke to so-and-so in the elevator, whatever. What did they say? That's what I want you to remember, like now and always. That's the core message, okay? In every one of your effective communications, you should know exactly what your core message is, because if you don't, it's probably not a good communication, right? Open question, open discussion here. You're going to communicate the same way that you would with your peers as you would with, your boss. Like, what are some of the differences that you're going to kind of pull up as far as like interacting with your coworkers or, with your clients, like that kind of thing? Anybody have any ideas here? Yeah. Sure.
Not stray away from, but at least like relate to what they know so that way they can participate in this technology.
Absolutely. What else?
You know your coworkers, you know their level of understanding, you know their level of humor, whatever you want to look at it. You know how they'll react to saying something one way versus another. Whereas with clients, you may have only talked to them once or twice. So you gotta be careful how you word things so that there's sometimes just no offense is taken. But also that they're not on the same level of understanding as you and your coworkers, that I can, you can use like, for example, or an acronym or something that like radius server. I can say a radius server.
Sure.
Someone someone who's dealt with it knows what I'm talking about, but I actually have to explain what that is to a client and why they might need it, for example.
Totally. Oh, I saw a hand over here. Yeah.
Probably just be more formal with your clients rather than over the community.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah.
I think you need to provide more context as well to your clients. Sometimes your coworkers might already know what you're working on, but client might need a bit more explanation to get them up to speed.
So, I mean, this is a pretty open-ended question. The reason that I've included it originally was because I wanted this kind of discussion to demonstrate, like, this is something that you've probably already dealt with, but never really thought about. Why do you deal with these people differently? It's because of who they are to you. It's your relationship with the client versus with your coworkers. Obviously, it's the dynamic. Of course, clients are paying your bills, right? That kind of thing. It's important that, every so often you reflect on your communications and think about, who is this person to me? How am I interacting with them? And am I communicating with them effectively for the purpose that I'm trying to achieve, right? Consider my role. I mentioned one of my core functions is sales. So obviously I have to be very pleasant with my clients. I've got to take them out. I've got to wine them and dine them. I've got to make sure that they're feeling comfortable with me personally. I want to get to know them more than just what they do for their companies, because that personal relationship is important for fostering trust. That's my objective. So I need to tune my communications to serve that purpose, right? It's really important to think consciously about how you're interacting with people, and understanding your audience is kind of the first level of that. Who is this person? What am I trying to communicate? Am I using the right media for communication? And of course, what is it that I am trying to say? What is my core message? If they ignore me for, everything except one sentence, what is it, right? Moving on. Using plain language. Anybody ever heard that term before? Plain language? Any idea what that is? Take a stab. Go for it. Oh, okay.
Words that the person you're speaking to will understand.
Let's make it even simpler. What is plain language?
Any average person would understand.
Sure. no technical jargon, right? That's the long story short of it. When we're talking in plain language, we're not using any technical or sort of specific terminology that's unique to our field or our specialty or what have you, right? We're speaking in plain terms. The reason for that is because irrespective of who you're talking to, if you're speaking the same language, you're starting at the same level, you're not necessarily on the same level in terms of knowledge as you might be in language. And that's where you start with the language. You make it simple, right? When you think about how am I going to communicate effectively, often plain language is a starting point, right? I like to say that if you don't understand something well enough to communicate it in plain language, you probably don't understand it well enough to begin with, right? Because if you can't articulate something abstract, technical, sensitive, down into that plain language descriptor, you're going to have a really bad time. Because I'll tell you, if you try and talk about, CVEs and vulnerabilities and all kinds of these, remote code execution, deserialization vulnerabilities with executives, they're literally going to ignore you. You know what I mean? Like, they will not listen. They don't have the time for it, nor the interest, or the bandwidth for that matter, right? That's not how you're going to deliver value. So when you need to translate, right? Think about plain language. I think it's a really good starting point. How can I put this most simply? How can I put this without any technical jargon or any abstract specific terms, things like that? And then, of course, anybody ever heard about, asking for confirmation? Does that make sense? Okay. In conversation, pardon me?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks. I'm not paying these guys enough. I think this is a really important and really effective strategy, especially in our field when you want to seem like maybe a stronger communicator than you are, or that, maybe you are genuinely unsure of whether or not you've communicated effectively. Maybe you are talking about something that is really specific. You can always ask, hey, does that make sense? Right? Are we on the same page? And that establishes, and provides an opportunity for whoever you're communicating with to confirm to you that they're picking up what you're putting down. Right? They're following the conversation. They're feeling comfortable to engage, to follow up. Right? So ask, does that make sense? It's a great strategy, not only to sort of ensure that there is common understanding, but honestly, it will make you sound a lot smarter than you might be. Straight up. I think another thing that is kind of worth paying attention to, so consistency in your terminology. If you're going to use an acronym and you're working with other people who are, proficient with that acronym, stick with it. Don't change it up. Make sure that you're using common terminology that, maybe the vendor is using or the client is using. Try and adopt the other person's if you can. That's a generally pretty good strategy. And then, of course, the rule of one. So I like to think about the rule of one being that you really should be tuning your communication up or down based on sort of the lowest common denominator in the room. So if you have one person who's not technical, your communications in general should not be technical, right? Even if they're another technical person in the call or, in the meeting, whatever, you want to make sure that you're tuning it to sort of the lowest common denominator in the room whenever possible. It's not always 100% possible to do, fair enough, but do your best because it will be recognized. It's noticeable when you are trying to be conscious of the people that even, your communication might not be directed at, but they're experiencing it just the same. So tune to the rule of one. Think about who you need to cater to in your, business ongoing. Well, pen test findings. Let's go back to pen testing because we have seemed a pretty solid on pen testing. We know what that is. You guys done a pen testing course yet? No. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about what goes into a pen test finding. Anybody have any ideas here? You got to put together a Word document here. Give me some headers. What goes in there? That's crazy. Oh, risk. I like that. Okay. I'm going to pick on you later for risk. What else? Sure. POC. Yeah, of course. A demonstration. What else? Sure. Yeah. So the impact, likelihood, and a descriptor. Absolutely. Yeah. What else? Sure. So where is it exposed? Absolutely. What else? Yeah. So remediation, right? So what are you going to do about it? Okay. Well, it's a report. So, Joel, go ahead.
Cost of what could happen if you don't remediate it. Like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna have something that could be a massive breach of information, what's gonna be the cost to fix it after that breach has happened as opposed to fixing it upfront?
So you guys are in the same wavelength thinking about risk, which is good. We'll
Risk
come back.
impact.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in the next. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exposure. So, I mean, it's a report, right? The point is to communicate all of this. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's first think about understanding the audience. Who's going to use a pen testing report? In smaller companies, for sure. Yeah. I mean, maybe not in the very, very large ones, but ultimately it is going to go upward and onward. That's correct. Who else? Yeah. Who else? Stakeholders. What kind of stakeholders are we talking about? Sure, investors are stakeholders, absolutely. What else? Devs, yeah, why not? If it's their application, sure. All of these people need to be able to take all of those different fields that we just talked about and derive something different from it. So think about that for a minute. When we talk about the rule of one and our lowest common denominator for communication and getting our point across, regardless of who's reading the report, we're starting to see a trend here, right? So if you're a developer, you probably want something different out of that pen test finding for your application than if you're the C-level. The C-level wants to know risk, right? How much is this going to cost me if something goes wrong? What kind of risk am I exposed to by this vulnerability? The devs, they might want to know, well, how did you break it, right? So that we can fix it. What's the remediation steps to do next, right? Your security managers, they might also want some of that sort of impact and likelihood, maybe for financials, because maybe they're trying to get justification for investment, new tooling or something that can mitigate this kind of risk. Okay. There are probably 10 different downstream consumers of this one single report that all want something different out of it. So again, I asked the question, how do we present this finding? It's a real problem when you start to think about it, right? So lots of plain language, right? We communicate in something common, the lowest common denominator. We want this to be readable so that even a C-level can extract value from it quickly and efficiently because that's what they need. We also need to make sure that it's detailed enough that the devs can get enough information about fixing this problem to begin with. But all of this at its core comes to how are we communicating all this information that we've collected and, turned into now knowledge.
I got a question.
Jump in, go for it.
So, got the penetration test. Do you recommend having a separate technical analysis for the cybersecurity team and a non-technical report for like the stakeholders and clients? Because you kind of need the technical information, and that has to be in detail, so nothing is missed out.
So every penetration testing team will do this differently, but often what will happen is they'll include both in the same report, but you might see the deeper technical details or all the POC stuff included in an appendix, because then it's available for the people who need it, still a part of the report, but it isn't necessarily the first thing that they're going to see, right? Your C-levels are probably not even going to make it past the executive summary. They're going to want to know what was done, what the output is in terms of sort of the risk, and then of course what's going to be done about it in terms of the fixes, right? They are literally not going to get past the graphical figures in the report. They will not read a single one of the findings, not unless it's like ultra high criticality and one of their people says, hey, you need to read that one, right? So again, consider the audience. It's not that there's one strict way of, doing like one technical, one summative report. Most reports will include an executive summary section. That's kind of good practice. And then beyond that, you'll probably see more technical details or detailed findings and observations included later, and even further detail included in an appendix, right? Same as you would for your school assignments.
Yeah.
So. Well, I think that this kind of illustrates the point that I'm trying to make, which is there's a lot of people that are going to be relying on the communication related to this technical activity. They all want something different. We need to use good, effective communication skills to build plain language, common language, findings that deliver value to all those different stakeholders, considering who is going to receive and use that communication, right? You guys seen this clip in the office? Why use many word when few word do trick? I love it. It's a great example. Okay. I like this verbiage of being precise and concise in saying what you mean and meaning what you say. I notice I didn't have to look at this one because I remember this. I like this a lot. This is something I try and practice. I'm gonna look now. When I think about the precision of language, the selection of the words that you're using, there should be meaning behind every word you use. Because if there isn't, why are you putting it in that sentence? Right? And then when I think about conciseness, I think about the economy of language, right? How much time does it take for me to extract meaning from a communication? I don't want to have to read through paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs to find out, hey, we got a big problem, right? It's not very efficient. And so I like this idea of being precise and concise with your language. Now, one caveat, this is hard. You guys ever heard about how it's way harder to make something shorter than it is to make something longer? You guys ever experienced that? I suck at this. I'm very floral with my language. I like to have kind of the more formal kind of tone, especially in business communications when I'm not, super close to people. My manager, when I was at KPMG, taught me a very important lesson at one point when I was applying to get funding for my OSCP. And I wrote him like a 2,000 word email. And I gave him everything from, here's how much it's going to cost. Here's why I think it'll deliver value to the firm. Here's my plan for completing it. Here's this, blah, 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 blah. You know what I got back? I literally got back, lol, I'm not reading this. Summarize this in 3 sentences or less and send it back to me. True story. Love that guy. Something that he taught me actually is kind of a methodology that I think is worth starting to practice in most of your professional communications. And it's actually derivative from a military method called BLUF. And BLUF stands for your bottom line up front. Okay, again, your core message. If I had to only take one thing, from this communication, what would it be? That is your bottom line up front. You should start and end your communication with the most important core message because it's very effective. Not only is it repetition, which as a literary device is great for making people remember things, but also when you consider the economy of your language and your communication, you want that core idea to be the first thing that people think about and the last thing that they think about when they're getting ready to respond, right? So again, think about the precision of your language, choose your words carefully. Each one should be selected. Your communication should be bespoke, finely crafted and tuned to your audience and for your purpose, whatever you're trying to accomplish. They should also be concise in that you need to consider the economy of your language. If you're too wordy, people are going to be really bothered by what it is that you have to say. And I know that this sounds like, well, duh, of course, Todd, but really, when was the last time you guys thought about this consciously? You guys ever had like a prof roast your writing and be like, you could have said this much simpler? Or you ever get one of those before? I had a fair few number of those, right? This is hard. This takes conscious practice. I would encourage you guys to think about this more. I would say being brief when possible is generally a preference in the business world. There is a time and place to kind of flex your language and whatever, that's all well and good, but provide your bottom line up front. That's the most important thing. The last thing, nonverbal cues. You guys ever heard about body language? I tell you, I'm doing a horrible job because I'm looking at the screen, turn around, whatever. That's because this is old. I don't remember it all that well. But there's a lot of things that you might not expect that actually tell you a lot more about what a person is thinking and feeling and how they're responding to your communications than you might expect. Right? Oh, went too far. You guys ever seen like YouTube videos of people doing like body language interpretation? Like it kind of looks like mind reading, or like you see people that do like mentalist like card tricks and things like that. You ever seen that before? So a lot of those use body language as kind of the tell-alls, the cues that kind of prompt like what is going to happen next in those magic tricks and things like that. The reason being is because it's a lot harder to maintain your composure than you might think. Even as I'm talking to you guys, I'm seeing people like roll their eyes and be like, "Oh, whatever." I get it. Okay. But I guess it's important to recognize this can be a big advantage to you if you're aware of this and others are not. People who are responding physically to what you have to say and the ideas that you're conveying, they do respond in ways that are not necessarily verbal, right? Consider the media. This is a presentation, so you guys are all sitting quietly. Of course, you're not going to be speaking up and lashing out at me and whatever, right? But with that in mind, I, as the presenter, know, okay, well, somebody's falling asleep, or they're working away on their laptop. I know they're clearly not listening and they're not interested. Or if I see them nodding, okay, maybe they're agreeing with me, right? That means something I just said really resonated with them, right? Those physical tells can give you a lot of information about what's really going on in a meeting, or what's going on between two people, or even between, you and someone else as far as your communication goes. And it says way more than whatever is coming out of the other person's mouth. That's really important to learn early, because there are a lot of people that would like lie to you in cold blood and they will have a smile on their face, right? So a couple of things to think of. So eye contact, first and foremost, eye contact is really, really important for engagement. Okay. You guys done any like remote work yet? So some people have done remote work. You're sitting in a Teams call and you see people like, looking around and whatever. There's no way they're paying attention, right? You call their name and they're like, yeah, sorry, can you repeat the question? Whatever. Your professors will probably do the same thing too, right? If you're like working away in class and like, playing Minecraft or whatever, they ask you a question, right? They're looking for that because again, the body language is kind of betraying you. You're not making eye contact with people. That means you're not engaged, or that they're not engaged with you. It's a big tell. And it's generally pretty easy to spot. Your posture says a lot about how you're feeling in the situation that you're in. And this is a big one as far as like social engineering and stuff goes. You guys ever heard of social engineering? Okay. This is a really, really important one for like physical pen test, social engineering, because again, how somebody is standing can tell you if they're feeling comfortable with you at your distance, in their space, how they're sitting or whatever is going to tell you about like their physicality. Are they tired? Are they engaged? Right? You can kind of infer a lot of things based on somebody's physical posture. If their shoulders are sitting back, they're probably more relaxed. If I'm letting my hair down, I'm probably more relaxed, right? Things like that. They're very obvious. They're things that you probably pick up on subconsciously, but if you actually understand and think a little bit more critically about, well, why are these behaviors actually showing? That's actually going to give you a little bit of an edge in that conversation, because you can color your communication around, okay, I'm losing this person. I need to kind of like jump back in. Maybe I'm going to do that by calling them by name or something like that, right? It gives you a lot of actionable intelligence on how a communication is kind of unfolding in real time. Gestures. So I'm not up here standing with my hands at my side or, whatever in the back. I'm using my hands because it's visually stimulating. You guys are looking at my hands while I'm waving around up here, whatever. There is a point where it becomes distracting. So I'm trying to be mindful of how much I'm doing it, but there's purpose behind me having my hands up. Okay. When you use gestures, again, you're communicating non-verbally. It's a visual indicator. It's something that people are going to look at and they're going to say, oh, okay, well, they're kind of like, they're fidgeting. So maybe they're not so sure about what I said, or maybe they're nervous about something, or, they raise their eyebrows. They don't believe what I just said, right? There's like visual tells that you've probably never thought about in the context of like a business communication. This stuff becomes really important when you're working remote because you often can't see people's full bodies. You're focused on the face, you're focused on their shoulders, you're focused on their backgrounds and things that you can see, right? So this stuff, it's not any one single thing, it adds up. Facial expressions, most people don't have a very good poker face. You'll find that out pretty quickly. It's not just for poker, it's also at work, right? When you think about how people are perceiving you or how you're perceiving their ideas, and certainly if you're disagreeing, you're very likely to let something slip, and that tells them everything that they need to know, right? So consider your gestures, your facial expressions. Those are kind of more subtle communications that they become even harder to read in that digital media, but they're super important. Ah, this is a cool one. So I mentioned social engineering, right? What do you guys think social engineering really boils down to? If you had to pick one element of a communication or one element of the relationship between you and your target, what does it come down to? I disagree, but trust. I like that. Anything else? Yeah, yeah. I think it's trust. What else? Yeah, I mean that's definitely a big part of it for sure. What else? Confidence, absolutely. But I think confidence feeds into trust. I think psychology also builds into trust, right? I think actually a lot of this stuff builds into trust. Sort of. Yeah. Exactly. You can't deceive somebody that is untrusting of you, right? So totally, that's a part of it, right? Charisma, right? You're much more likely to trust somebody who's confident and charismatic and, that's welcoming, inviting, and whatever, right? So some of these strategies, I think, we're thinking about as far as effective communication. People generally are more open to communicating with people that they like. Okay, full stop. So it doesn't really matter why that is. It could be the tone of your voice. It could be physical appearance. It could be your clothes. It could be any number of those things. You want to be able to be well liked in order to be an effective communicator in a lot of situations. There are a couple of common things that you can do to kind of improve your odds at being able to communicate effectively. So one thing, mirror. You guys ever heard that term before? Mirroring somebody, right? So if somebody uses a certain expression, maybe you pick that up into your vocabulary and you start using that, you're kind of mirroring that behavior. They're going to see that as common ground between the two of you, right? That starts to build that trust, build the relationship between you because you have this shared experience, this shared understanding, right? So mirroring people, whether it's a turn of the tongue, like an expression they use, or whether it's a physical thing, right? Could be in the type of clothing that they wear. It could be in gestures that they use. It could be in, the type of keyboards that they use. Okay. Mirroring is a really important strategy for effective communication because it helps you build that trust and build the relationship, the foundation of those effective communications. Demonstrating engagement. So, you ever try talking to a brick wall? I'll tell you, I've spoken to some people that are a bit like talking to a brick wall because they don't engage. And it makes it really hard to get a feel for, are they actually hearing what I have to say or are they just doing something else, right? So demonstrating your engagement is a good way to open up to that other person and say, hey, I'm involved in this conversation, in this communication. I'm here, I'm present, I'm participating actively, right? So demonstrating engagement, whether that's nodding your head, whether that is, consciously doing something like putting your phone down in front of a person, whether that is closing your laptop, there are a lot of ways to show, hey, you have my attention. And that's a really, really important thing because people are going to communicate more openly and more candidly with you in that case, if they're feeling like you're here to listen, right? Dressing appropriately. I mean, this is kind of more, call it professionalism, right? Know your audience, know who you're dealing with. You're probably not going to show up to a cocktail hour, in a tux, but you're also probably not coming in your sweatpants. Especially if your sea level's there, you probably want to be looking sharp, that kind of thing. Dressing effectively is something that I think is maybe understated because again, take the social engineering example. If you are trying to break into a building and you come in looking like a service repairman, you're going to have a lot better of a time than if you're showing up in your jammies, You know what I mean? On one hand, you're going to look like you belong there. On the other, maybe you're not. Consider your audience, consider the context of your communication. Think about the clothing you wear because it actually makes a huge difference, not just for social engineering, but in general in your career, it will help or harm if you neglect it. Beyond that, I would say using silence is really important. We talked just briefly about asking, hey, did that make sense? Right? But that introduces a natural pause into your conversation every time you ask that question. And when you think about the silence in between your words, sometimes it's really important. I mean, you guys probably seen people like Steve Jobs speaking before. You guys ever seen any really good presenters who they get up there and they use these dramatic pauses for effect? You know what those pauses actually do in a conversation is they introduce a moment for somebody to stop, think, and actually reflect on what has just come out of your mouth. Exactly, right? It is a natural period where you're giving somebody space to process. I try and do it. I'm not that good at it, but I think it's important to remember, why are you doing this? Silence is a really effective tool in speech because, again, it invites participation. When you've ended your sentence or when you've ended your thought and you create this gap, it's kind of awkward, right? So what do people do? Instinctively, they respond. They fill the gap. They jump in and they engage. So using silence really effectively is good kind of for those two reasons, right? One being that you can kind of invite participation and demonstrate that you're done. Yeah, I've communicated my idea to you. What do you think of it? The other being that, of course, it provides space for people to actually digest your communication, understand what you've had to say, or what you've presented. So using silence, it's an underrated strategy for communication. I think it's really important, whether it's for dramatic effect or whether it's a practical thing, consider that. And with that said and done, we reached the Q&A portion, which is kind of meant to be like a ask me whatever you guys want, because communication skills are so foundational. Most of this is stuff that you probably already knew, but had never really consciously and sort of purposely characterized, right? A lot of these are things that you either are doing or that you have done, but maybe not super intentfully. I hope that coming out of this presentation, when you're thinking about, again, not the jobs that you'll have, but the career that you build, you look for the opportunities to flex the communication muscles, because that is going to drive a lot of value. It's not just your technical skills that are important. It's also, how are you communicating the value that they bring to the people signing your checks and making the decisions at your company, right? So that's my talk. Open questions. Anything goes. Jump in.
Starting out, if you don't have any industry experience, if you don't have professional connections, but you have some of these soft skills like communication, teamwork, collaboration, and project management, how would you get that out there and leverage it for potential opportunities beyond just putting it on your resume or emphasizing it on cover letters?
Show it off. So chances are good that if you've got all those soft skills, you're probably doing pretty well in school, because a lot of your work is probably group work, right? So you're dealing with other people in that case. And that's often one of the hardest things you have to navigate in these technical programs, is the other people. So if you've got a portfolio of good work, especially good written technical writing or presentation materials, public speaking accolades, things like that, those are great things to showcase to prospective employers, because again, they're going to look at your resume and they want to know, certainly, do you have the minimum technical skills to do the job that we need you for? But they're evaluating for you for hire beyond just a 4-month co-op term. No businesses are hiring students without the intent of keeping them full time. Otherwise, they wouldn't be hiring students to begin with, right? They would just be going and hiring a full-time resource. So I would say build a portfolio and show it off. Leverage your academic work. Chances are good that if you have samples of your technical writing, whether it's your cumulative projects or your group work and things like that, those are great examples. They want to see that stuff, because more often than not, you're not working as a sole contributor in any of your positions in your co-op. Certainly not as a student, right? You're not going to be the one going and doing pushing code to prod. You're not the one person accountable for that stuff. Does that help?
I also just wanted to add about that comment as well. Another way that you can also show that is, so by attending ISSessions, that's great. Also tend to think of tasks. You said Toronto.
Yeah.
OWASP Toronto. There's a lot of opportunity for you to connect with people who are always looking for interns, and not just interns, but full-time or even experienced employees as well. And it's a good way to get yourself out there. It's if you're not good social skills, or even if you want to learn. Those communities are always a great one to reach into. You get to practice and you get to learn a lot more about people in the field, opportunities that are out there. And it's to get that.
I would totally agree with that too, right? Like the point of going to those meetups is it's a social event. It takes a bare minimum of social skills to be able to introduce yourself and engage with people at those events in person. And I think that that is more demonstration than most students actually put into the efforts for their applications and that kind of thing. The networking piece is honestly way harder than you'd expect, but that's because it relies so heavily on your social skills.
Is it even find those principalities or the place to go?
Well, so ISSessions is a pretty good place to start, right? Like a lot of these do end up getting posted, but regionally, there's a different sort of, we'll call it professional networking ecosystem in all different areas all across Ontario and Quebec and Canada at large. Your best bet is literally start Googling security conferences near me, and you'll see that there are a whole bunch that are happening. Here in Toronto, a very popular one that I think is definitely worth checking out would be Sector. You guys ever heard of Sector? So Sector's expo passes, where you get to go and walk the vendor hall and go to see all the vendors that hire students, is typically free with the code Expo 2024 or Expo 2025 or whatever it is, right? They're normally $50. Your professors probably also have free passes, right? Sector gives a lot of passes out to the post-secondary community here regionally. And again, it's kind of like a vendor and call it technical talk track type event. You'll see lots of vendors that, maybe you've never even heard of, and many of them are hiring, many of them have opportunities for students, and it's a great chance to learn about tech, obviously make some new friends, and of course, participate and call it the regional security ecosystem. So I would start with Sector for sure.
But I was gonna ask, like, how would I go about talking to employers or networking? Like, how do I initiate that? Because I feel like I'm fine once I begin talking to them, but just finding the reason to engage with them without looking desperate for connections or whatever and stuff like that. So how would you go about doing that?
There is nothing wrong with being desperate for connections. Let's start there. All right. Don't kill the part of you that's cringe, kill the part of you that cringes. You know what I mean? Don't worry too much about that external perception. You're there for a reason. You want to go and network. You want to meet people. That's a great reason to be at that conference. And other people are probably there for the same reason. You go up to a booth and you talk to, people from a vendor, maybe they're not the right people. You're talking to salespeople. They're going to shoo you away because you're a student and they're not going to want to talk to you. They want to find customers and prospects. But that comes back to understand your audience. Who are you talking to at the booth, right? Are you talking to sales engineers? Are you talking to, account executives? Those people, they're probably not technical. They're probably not hiring students. Or are you talking to, maybe a co-op coordinator? Maybe they even have somebody designated their campus recruitment, right? Lots of these companies do. So again, understand your audience, figure out who's who. And based on that, either exit quickly and move on to somebody more productive with your time, or continue the conversation as you see fit. But there's nothing wrong with going up to the vendors and saying, hey, I don't know anything about your company. Tell me about it. And they're going to say, who are you? And you're going to say, I'm a student. And they're still going to tell you about the company. You're still going to learn something. You're still going to make a new connection. You can always ask, hey, can I add you on LinkedIn? I'm really interested in this space. I would love to follow the company. Nobody's going to shut you down, put it that way. Especially here too, regionally, it's a small world. So what you'll find very quickly is you're going to start seeing familiar faces. You'll see me at Sector, right? You'll see other people there as well. and you'll start to recognize folks. You'll start to be recognized. It helps a lot when you're starting to look for referrals and sort of one of those who you know type positions down the line. So don't be afraid of that. Don't even overthink it. If you're there for connections, be forward and say, hey, I'm here to network. I'm looking for my next opportunity. Do you guys hire students? That's perfectly acceptable. Joel.
I'd argue with that, even if you did end up talking to a sales guy, they got to know their audience, they realize that this is not the audience they want, but they might know who it is, and they may still pass you on to someone else in the booth that can talk to you.
Absolutely. And you can ask, hey, look, you're not hiring students, but does anyone in your company hire students or any of them at the booth? Good question to ask, right? Go for it.
Yeah. There's like a full path as well.
Yeah, so fair warning, Sector is expensive, it's paid, not a free conference. Sector is sort of one part education. You can pay for technical training and talk tracks that you want to go and see like a very specific presentation from a speaker that you follow and things like that. That's paid. Those sessions are limited in seating and attendance. The alternative being that you get the expo pass, and there's a big expo hall that's full of vendors. The expo hall, the expo pass is typically $50, and it's often free for students. They typically will release like an expo pass code that makes it for free. In fact, I would encourage you to ask your professors, hey, do you have the expo pass code for a free pass if I want to go to Sector and go and network with the vendors and stroll through the vendor hall? But
It's the program.
Yeah.
Here organizes the passes for fifth term students.
Yeah.
You would also be the one that would know stuff about the pass he's talking about.
But consider it like Canada's Black Hat, albeit a bit smaller. I mean, Black Hat, I believe, actually owns the event, like they bought it out or something to that effect. They're involved in the organization. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a vendor showcase. It's a marketing thing for them. It's also technical training and education, as well as sort of community knowledge sharing and that kind of thing as well. But for students, I don't really recommend that you pay out of pocket. If your employer wants to send you in, you're on a co-op term, that's cool. If you want to go to the vendor expo and get the expo pass, that's also really cool. I think that's awesome for students to start getting a sense of like what exists in the security landscape as far as product and opportunity goes. But as far as the paid passes and the training and education, it's pretty pricey. So yes. And B-Sides is a little bit different in terms of the audience. So B-Sides is often much more technical, much more, call it practitioner oriented, whereas Sector is for a wider audience. And you'll see, all kinds of business executives, you'll see C-suites from all the banks and stuff all coming regionally to Sector in Toronto. Sector is much closer to a Black Hat than a B-Sides or a DEF CON or something like that.
There's still like employers that
So B-Sides has sponsors, but typically doesn't have like hiring employers there directly, but you will definitely meet some really cool people at B-Sides who often are hiring for positions on their teams and things like that, right? So for example, Christian and I gave a talk at B-Sides, was it last year?
Yeah, last year.
And yeah, I mean, there's lots of speakers that are there representing their company and certainly advocating on behalf of the work that they're doing and kind of sharing it with a more practitioner focused, call it more deeply technical audience. So it's not to say no, but it's probably less the intent. Go for it.
Also on that, there's a lot of opportunity to speak at B-Sides. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure here at Sheridan is actually speaking this year. At B-Sides. When I was speaking with Todd last year, I was only with KPMG for a year, and I'm pretty sure I might have been still a student at that time. On top of that, there's even 5-minute lightning rounds. These are kind of a toss of whether or not they happen. So I think they've happened for 2 times in a row now. So it's just a 5 minutes talk, and I know a lot of people who are looking for jobs have spoken at it, added it to their resume. It helps make you look at it as even that is another way to network with a lot of people who are interested in what you're talking about, or people who would like just to get to know more about what you know.
Great thing to put into your portfolio, demonstrating your soft skills, your employability. Anything else? Anything goes, folks. Yeah. What is my keyboard? Come see it. So it's It's a GeonWorks F18X722. It was round one production. It's a small manufacturer in Korea. They produce some pretty high-end specialty keyboards. This one is very special because it's built with a whole bunch of different custom components, and it's one of my favorite that I've built. It was an impulse buy, something that I was like, there's no way I'll get one of these because there was only about 500 of them made, and I happened to get lucky. And so I decided I was going to build it and build it right, and now it's here. You can get your hands on it if you like and give it a try and ask me about it if you want. Probably one of fewer than 100 that ever made it overseas. So it's fairly special. Try and pick it up. You'll be surprised. Cool. Thanks for having me, guys.
Much appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Todd, for giving us your time. I have Monaghan's reserved for 9, so if you do want to come over to Monaghan's and get something to eat, I'll be over there. Please come on out, and I'll send some more updates for the next session in 2 weeks. So thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.